time I put it on silent, and some reason it still dinged, which was kind of spooky. What I'm gonna do this time, and you're gonna see me do it, is I'm literally gonna turn my phone completely off. If anything happens, I've done my due diligence.
Yeah.
Well, we always say that too, and it's inevitably somebody's
When it
phone.
starts ringing, I'm out of here. I'm done. Be like, nope.
Yep.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right. Hi, and welcome to the Y'all Ain't Right podcast. I'm Brittany. I'm here with Todd, Nick, and today we are joined by a guest, J. Adam Smith. So he's actually a paranormal historian, and we're going to be talking about ghosts and paranormal activity today. So if you wouldn't mind just...
Can we talk about something more interesting?
Yeah, for real.
If you see me running out of the room.
If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about what you do.
Well, hello everyone who's listening in. I am J. Adam Smith. I'm known as the Paranormal Historian. For those of you who watch the ghost hunting shows, I'm what you call a minor film personality. I have been on Travel Channel's Paranormal Paparazzi, got award-winning documentary that's on PBS, been on Tennessee Valley Uncharted. Also a writer with Paranormal Underground magazine, along with lots of other accolades, and I've been investigating for over 20 years. And I'm what you call a master teacher, and they have been deeming me as a paranormal expert. So that's kind of my story. I'm just happy to be able to train new people as a teacher and all that. So thanks for having me here.
Yeah, of course.
That's awesome.
Definitely have a voice for radio / podcasts.
I don't know if it's just my morning voice or what, but it's definitely got some bass in it.
Yeah, you'll fit right in.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by what you do. How did you get into it in the first place?
Well, to be honest with you, that's one of the things that I find the most interesting with this, and it allows me to be kind of in that neutral position. Is, I was a skeptic before I got into this field, and I was literally forced into this field. Being a professional violinist, instructor, and recording artist, my original chapter was I had an amazing school down in Florida. So unique that not only was I teaching violin, but I was also teaching the art of performance, and specialized with elementary to middle school and high school, actually teaching them to perform. And some of the best places that they performed was like Disney, things like that, and it was quite an honor. But the last thing I would have thought when I bought a 1923 house that was going to be my home / school was that there was something else that was there, not just me and my students. And it kind of forced me into saying, what do I do? Do I run for the hills, or do I say, it's a new challenge. I'm going to figure out what the heck is going on. And at that point, I ended up getting certified, went through an online training to get an idea of what's going on, started running teams, started really kind of getting into the specialties in this kind of stuff. And I guess it's kind of stuck, I guess once you go down into the rabbit's hole, it's kind of like it's hard to come out of that rabbit's hole because everything's kind of unique or paranormal. By the way, for the group, let's check this out.
Oh, no.
What does paranormal mean?
I don't know.
We know what normal is, right?
Yeah. Para is not normal.
Is the absence of normal. It's kind of crazy because it's not really that scary when you actually break it down into context. It's just the absence. Things that we cannot explain is paranormal. That's all it is. Things that are just unusual.
But I think that's scary. Things that...
It can be. It absolutely can be. But again, once you go down that rabbit hole, you start seeing there are a lot of things that aren't explainable in this world that we're in.
So that would cover more than just ghosts, as people typically think. So.
And that's what's neat about being, having partnerships with Paranormal Underground magazine and having the opportunity to do, some, writings with them and all that kind of stuff, is that they cover everything from cryptozoology, ufology, ghostly stuff, things like that. And it's pretty cool, it's fascinating when you kind of look at all the possibilities.
So I was going to ask you if a lot of people that have had something happen, maybe they can't even explain what it is or just a feeling or whatever, everybody's always just like so fearful, and they're always saying like, oh, it's the scariest thing that's ever happened in my life. Do you think that maybe comes from just the unknown and we're not comfortable with the unknown? Or do you think that it could be like some of the energy from spirits or something like that.
I have to give you credit. That was 100%, because where I was actually going to go to answer that was the fear of the unknown. That's all it is. People ask me, it's like, what was the scariest, moment that you had with all the 20 plus years I've been in this field? And to be honest with you, it was when I first got into it, when I didn't believe this stuff was real. And what do I do now? This is crazy. I mean, you tell me how you would respond in a house that you're a violin teacher. You're doing lots of renovations to the building, which I'm sure you guys know pretty well, all about homes and renovations and selling and things like that. And then finding that I'm testing out an air mattress in the living room for a camping trip, and I get woken up by a male voice in the room with me.
Oh my gosh.
The fear of the unknown. What the heck is going on? And of course, what did I do? I ran to my parents' house in the middle of the night, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and of course, their eyes are partially shut, and they're like, honey, why are you here? And I literally said, I don't want to tell you.
Yep.
And here's the worst part. They would not let me in the house until I told them why I was there in the middle of the night. And then I says, I think my house is haunted. And the craziest part, they says, oh, okay, come on in. and it was really weird, because at that point I'm like, Mom, Dad, tell me why were you responding that way? And they're like, well, when you're a kid, we lived in New Jersey for a few years. We felt like the house was haunted. We didn't want to scare you kids. So they've been keeping it close to their heart, keeping it close to their chest. Because you have to understand, up until the last 10 to 15 years, the concept of ghosts, you were crazy if you even believed it. And now we're able to talk about it. And I think that's why so much has been going on in this field. So many activities have been going on. The tools, the technology has gone way up to the point that we can explain this stuff. And now, after 20, 30 years, my parents can actually say, yeah, we thought the house was haunted. Wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That is nuts.
Did you all pick up on any? Because it seems like kids seem to be a little more intuitive. Did you all pick up on
my
anything?
bedroom was on the second floor in
Okay.
that house, and I do remember hearing things in the attic. Now, of course, they ended up saying, it's probably mice or this or that and blah, blah, blah kind of stuff. And, of course, my sister, she of course has to pick on the younger brother kind of stuff. So she would get me scared. So, one's like, it's this mice, and the other one's like, oh, it's something, kind of something like that, But, of course, as a kid, this kid, your sister picking on you a little bit,
Yeah.
I think kids go either way. They're either not afraid because they don't know any better, or, like you said, you've got somebody feeding you, it's like, oh, it's, and making you scared. Just like a kid when they fall, half the time they're not hurt. They don't cry, but if you make a big deal about it, they know, and then they, all of a sudden I don't want to say they act, but, then they're like, oh, well, and stuff like that. I was just showing a house. It was only 7 years old. I think it was built like 2017, and I had the mom and the son with me, and the son's probably 23. He went out of the house because he said he just had bad vibes, and just, he had just a weird feeling. So, it was just like, he went out and sat in the car and wouldn't come back in.
Well, what is up with that bad vibes? You notice that
well, there's a little bit of a history to the house. I shared with the group. There was a note left for the realtors.
Right.
It was kind of weird. I won't get into it.
Get
for
out.
Disclosures. It was just like a weird
Did he
spousal.
see the note?
Bad energy.
Yeah, it was literally sitting on the counter.
But did he see it before he left?
Yeah, he did. So, there was a little bit of that. So
See, I'm always curious about that,
Yeah.
because to me, it's one of those things where, like, my 3.5-year-old would not be scared at all.
right.
Like, if a ghost materialized in the corner,
Yeah.
he'd probably go over and talk to
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Because he just
Doesn't know any better.
Doesn't know any better. And he might be
Worse
apprehensive.
or better.
And he hasn't seen those shows that call everything a demon.
Right.
Or,
So,
that's attacking.
Now, I may freak out and be like, get away. And then to that point, that's when he would react
Yeah.
in more of a negative way.
Right.
But I'm curious, the mind does
Yeah,
weird things.
exactly.
So, like, him seeing that note,
And there was a lot of
did it
old
influence his
furniture in the
reaction?
house that made it look older than what it was. Like, the furniture did not match the house at all. and the note. And when we get off the air, I'll share it with you.
Yeah,
it's just weird. It's just weird. Then I looked up who lived in the house, and there was a little more history there.
See, to me, that's always the weird thing. Like when you do an investigation or you take a tour with a group, you said earlier pre-recording, you have a lot of skeptics that
absolutely
go on the tours,
and that's okay. It's absolutely healthy
because they're like, let's see what this is really all about. I'd be in that 50-50 group.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be full skeptic, but I'm not a full believer.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I feel like some people get influenced by stuff like notes and stuff. So instantly he's got a bad vibe.
And the people around
about the situation. So now he's like, whoa, is he more on edge? Is he more susceptible to the vibe, if you will? For me, I just know that there are plenty of times where I've been in unique situations or places that I had every business being there, but you kind of get the hair on the back of your neck stands up, or you get that vibe that we all get when we know we're not alone. That's the thing that I can't explain.
Yeah,
right.
Because at that point, it's like I feel it. I know my body's telling me, or it's the trigger reaction, right? Like I'm in the presence of somebody. I'll look around, no one's there.
Yeah.
Or I feel like the hairs on the back of the neck start prickling a little bit, and it makes you start wondering what's going on. That's the thing I can't explain. That's why I would want to see some of the evidence.
And that's what is truly excited about what I offer, is being this master teacher in this field. What I specialize, because I'm a teacher in general. I literally came from being, I would like to say, a pretty darn good instructor. So when you're a teacher, naturally, you find that everything you do, you tend to be taking that teacher role just because it's kind of ingrained in you. And then that's where I find my tours extremely unique, because being an investigative historian downtown, being a professional investigator, that truly I feel like I'm honoring the field in general because of all the work I put into. It's not like 15 years ago I was just as talented as I am now in this field. It's that I developed it over 20 something years. I see things repeating itself. I see how things correlate with each other and things like this. But to go to what you were saying in regards to skeptics, there's 3 classifications I typically have. You got the believers, which is fine because they've had experiences, and it's hard to, they're not going to say, they're typically not going to question it because they're like, at this point, that door opened by itself. They're already believers. Then you got the skeptics, which is excellent because the skeptics keep us honest with our investigation process. Make sure it's like, okay, that door opened. Did we check the slope? Did we check the airflow in there? The challenging ones, the individuals that sometimes get dragged on the tours due to maybe their girlfriend's really into this and they're like, I'm just trying to make her happy kind of thing. But the biggest issue are those people who basically stigmatize this field based on what they see on TV, and it's all a joke to them. And that's where I like to try to say, hey, hold a second. I get that you got a little bit of a challenging aspect against this based on what you see. I'm not trying to change your mind. Just be open-minded enough with this. You're going to have the tools in your hand. Try to explain it. Why did this happen? And at that point, like last night, I had an individual that kind of stepped towards a little bit in regards to stuff. And I says, look, I get you're skeptic. That's fine. I said, but listen, just give it a chance. Give it an opportunity. You look at the equipment, then make up your mind. Don't have that initial saying, nothing you're going to say is going to change your mind. Nothing you're going to say, is actually going to be taken seriously. That's the crazy side.
Well, I know you go like around downtown Knoxville and stuff, and I'm sure you go to a lot of the same.
Knoxville, I never heard of that place.
I'm sure you see a lot of like the same places. I saw one of your videos where you're talking to the rowing man on, I think it's Gay Street.
Okay.
And do you ever, and you're getting like some answers and things like that, and talking about multiple spirits being there, do you ever get maybe the feeling that you're talking to the same ones more than once? Or?
That's a tough one because if what is the population of Knoxville? And with that, what's the population of the spirits in Knoxville? Right. It's really hard to say. But ultimately, here's what I love about Knoxville. One, I'm not trying to make something up in regards to Knoxville. Knoxville started with me in understanding the history. So I came from Florida, and I always make a joke. I say, look, if I did history long enough in Florida, I'm just going to find more gators because it's a sandbar. But when I moved up here to Knoxville, one of the things that fascinated me the most is that living in a city that has so much history. So at that point, I just got excited to spend time researching the city and get to know Knoxville. Where do we come from? You got the Trail of Tears, Revolutionary War, Civil War, mobsters, gunslingers, secret societies, all this. But what I kept on seeing was trauma, secrets hidden. And I'm like, my brain was saying, well, what is the probability with a city that has that much trauma? Wouldn't there be something left over potentially? And that's the key element. And I think one of my most heartfelt or it connects to my heart things that happen. So my legacy is actually letting the world know about Knoxville, just kind of like you guys are letting them know about amazing real estate in Knoxville, which is a great place to live, by the way, those who are listening. But what I love about Knoxville is just the key element that I put it on a national map. So we're all familiar with Ghost Hunters, Taps, where it all started in the 90s. They actually have a magazine, and they did a feature over 10 years ago calling my work the hidden gem of haunted America. And how many people can say that? How many people can say that instead of going to all these tourist attractions, Waverly Hills, all these haunted places you see on all the TV shows, to actually be the one who's uncovering the new ground zeros? And so I've been lucky enough to have a special event, Nightmare on the Tracks, for 2.5 years. First one to ever investigate the Newmarket train disaster. I also did the $1 Million Fire event, 1897 $1 Million Fire, where I got a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation showing all the shady aspects to that $1 Million Fire and giving people the opportunity to investigate there for the first time. So how cool is that to be in that position to actually disclose and uncover this amazing haunted historical locations downtown?
Well, I mean, that's awesome, first and foremost. But you mentioned in there the Ghost Adventure or Ghost Hunters, the original kind of mainstream TV show, if you will, that kind of brought all that up to the forefront. I got big into it when they came out, and started watching that. I also watched Zach Baggins with Ghost Adventures, and I think that was Nick Groff and a couple other guys.
Aaron.
Yeah.
I actually got, of that crew, to be honest with you, I'm not a fan at all of Ghost Adventures and Zach Bagans. It's because I am a real paranormal investigator, and one of my legacies, again, on top of opening up Knoxville to the world, is one to teach people that, yes, spirits might exist, but there's a right way to investigate and there's a wrong way to investigate.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, the correlation, because when you watch Ghost Hunters, it's very methodical. It's very kind of planned out, if you will.
And they did that on purpose, yes.
Yeah.
To satisfy the skeptics and the believers.
Right. And I feel like if you're going to do an investigation like that, wouldn't it be better to be prepared and plan? I mean, knowing that the second anything happens, your plan, a good plan is wasted after the first gunshot, right?
Go sideways.
Yeah, I mean, and they always do. But to be prepared for what you're about to do, Ghost Adventures was always to me more cinematic, more for the show rather than for the show and the dough rather than the activity itself. And I've just wondered, what do you feel, having done this for so long, how do you feel the progression of like the mainstream media has brought to ghost hunting, if you will? Do you think the shows are becoming more Hollywoodized and more fantasized, or do you think they're getting more accurate, with the tech and all that stuff?
It's a love and hate. It truly is. If it wasn't for all the shows, I don't think our technology and our investigation method would be where it's at. But on the other side of the coin, you got a lot of young, impressionable people who are looking at Zach Bagans and saying, I want to be like him.
Yeah.
And the problem is, here's a scenario I'll give you. You're sitting at a bar. There's a guy next to you. And you don't know that guy that's sitting next to you is a stranger. But as long as you treat that guy next to you with respect, you have nothing to fear. But the moment that you pick a fight with a random stranger, at that point, that person's history comes into play. You don't know whether he's been in and out of jail. You don't know if he's got a short temper. So you got these people who are investigating these facilities and they're doing it aggressively.
Yeah, that's the thing.
You're
that always
picking
got me.
fights. And if you pick a fight with an invisible entity, you are rolling the dice whether there's going to be issues. Why is it 20 plus years investigating, I haven't had significant issues? Don't get me wrong. I do spirit combat as well. I've dealt with the dirty of the dirty. And thank goodness for my faith, belief in God and Jesus and all this and the Bible. That kept me safe because, God trumps everything and darkness hates that. But they will. Darkness will test your faith, and that's a big thing. Thank goodness I got the faith. The faith.
Yeah, I'm not picking a fight with somebody. I
No.
can't.
Well, see, that's the thing to me. I said it when we first came in, and that's why I wanted to bring up the shows, because I was curious of your opinion. Some of those guys, let's say they were getting actual activity. Would you really want to be that aggressive with something that is paranormal, that is something that you can't explain, that you're just now beginning to learn kind of the limitations or the abilities that they might have? Like, why are you yelling and screaming aggressively at something to come at you?
It's good for TV.
Well, exactly.
Absolutely. And it's also an adrenaline rush. So you have to be aware. The reason why these
Yeah.
scary shows are on is because there are individuals who like the rush
Yeah.
of that fear. And like I said, that is not good, to be honest with you. So we as humans have polarities, good and bad, yin and yang. You got good emotions, happiness, joy, and you got negative emotions, fear, anger, and sadness. And what's interesting happened is, if you want to get into the energy aspect, is the concept of you're watching the show is creating adrenaline rush of the fear, and what's actually happening is it's lowering your vibration. And it's like, that's dangerous. So that's one of the reasons why I'm working on a TV show called My Haunted Adventure, where I was blessed to actually do a 10-day loop around Ireland and investigate castles. And
that's cool.
I got to work with one of the biggest castle companies there. And you have to be careful. You truly have to be careful when you're doing your investigations. You have to understand. And sociology, history is very important. For example, in the 1800s, how important was please and thank you?
Very.
Yeah, extremely.
And is it as important as it is nowadays?
No.
Is it
Nowhere
even
near
is
where
it
it should
is it even close? Most kids
think it's even-
it's not even in their.
Yeah.
But back but back in the 1800s, if you were talking to a stranger and you didn't use those generalized communication stuff, you're literally pissing them off. You're disrespecting them just by doing that. How many of these ghost shows do you ever see them when they're going into these old buildings that might be inhabited by the original people living there, and you don't use please and thank you, you don't use a general conversation, and you don't even call the flashlight a torch or a lantern to try to bridge that gap with knowledge base, because we do use a flashlight as a trigger device. And I actually educate people why we use it. And initially I was just like, using a flashlight to see if there's evidence of spirits there. But once you look into a flashlight and find out it's a simple circuit, and spirits are utilizing the arc to interact it, so electrical arc, spirits are energy, going down the path, But yeah, it's just, there is a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And people ask me, in the 15 years I've been doing my tours, what's the most significant thing that you've experienced downtown? And it's a crazy thing. A grandmother contacted me the next day after doing a tour with her granddaughter. She says, "Is this Jay?" I said, "Yes, it is." "Jay, I want to thank you." I said, "Why are you thanking me? I love taking you guys around." "Well," she says, "you don't know the history of my granddaughter." I said, "What's the history?" She says, "Well, she has issues sleeping in her bedroom by herself. She gets scared." She says, "After working with you, she can sleep in her bedroom without the lights on and all that." That is where I want my legacy to be. My TV show, My Haunted Adventure, is the key is I'm trying to show the light side of the paranormal world. Yes, spirits might exist, but they're not as scary as the TV shows make it out to be, as long as you're following the proper steps with interactions with them. You treat them with that respect that's necessary. And instead of getting go, leave, demon, all this kind of stuff, and scratches and pushes because you're pissing them off, now what you're actually doing is you're getting answers to your questions. Wow. Downtown, literally, some of the spirit responses we've got are historical answers to some of the questions about our city. One spirit, literally, actually multiple spirits on different occasions, actually says floggings were happening in Market Square back in 1800s. But our history books are not showing that. But it would make sense that we would have floggings, at least in the early parts of the 1800s when the city was done, because we didn't have policing. So we had to, so of course at that point I went through our historical records and say, is there any evidence in Knoxville that floggings occurred? And I did find that in the late 1700s, in one of our most famous history books, there was a man who stole a horse, and they wrote about what they did to him. They brought him to a public location downtown. They gave him 29 lashings. They weren't done. They put his head on a slab, nailed his ear to the slab, and cut a portion of the ear off. And they still weren't done. They pulled a branding iron with a HT out of the fire and branded his cheeks. And that was in the late 1700s.
Jeez.
So
I can
brutal.
tell you this, if I witnessed that, I would definitely not even touch another person's horse.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but think about the brutality, and most likely, but why is it that once the city was created, officially, so late 1700s, we're still not Knoxville. We go through the 3 treaties with the Indians. By the 3rd treaty, we had so many white settlers here, we could actually create Knoxville and, and segment it out. All right. Why is it that we're not getting those reports? Well, it's because once the city's settled, we don't want anything like floggings to kind of tarnish some of the famous families that may have.
Yeah, you don't want any negative connotations to go with
So
a new city.
So the
forming.
key is seeing. I did find that floggings occurred right before Knoxville was officially settled. Tells me that most likely it did carry on at least a little bit, at least into at least up to maybe the Civil War. That there was hangings downtown. I actually saw a note, old school, like 1800s, of a kid asking permission from his teacher to get out of school that day to go downtown to see the floggings, or not to see the hangings, not the floggings, the actual hangings. He wanted to get out of school so he could see hangings. Wow, what a crazy time to be.
I know. Just thinking about that, you're like, wow, that's the excuse you want to get out of school.
And he probably got out because back in those days, that was a big deal.
Oh, yeah, it was a spectacle. I know when I lived in Eastern Kentucky, Pikeville, they used to have public hangings for Hatfields and McCoys all the time. Well, not all the time, but I mean, they were, I've seen documentaries where the hillside was full of people watching it and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean.
Okay, craziest story in the history books. Did you know we loved hanging so much here in Knoxville that there was a elephant that went mad and went crazy?
I heard about this.
And they literally hanged.
Yeah.
They didn't kill the elephant. They had to make a spectacle and actually find a way to be able to literally hang an elephant by its neck and kill it.
I've heard this.
And that happened in good.
Wasn't it in Irwin? Because that's where I'm from, is that area. I think it was.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I'm very honest with my history. I do know these stories. I don't normally bring it up. It's just brought to my attention, so I don't have that. But it's somewhere in this area that it happened. Shoot, there was baseball games on Gay Street back in the day, and there was circuses right there on Gay Street as well, right where the Mass General Store area was and stuff. What I love, the city has got so much character. But here's the thing. Quit trying to change our history. And I'm going to say this to anyone who is in charge with the historical aspects of Knoxville. Quit. I'm serious about this. Quit changing our history. It doesn't change whether or not Knoxville's a wonderful place to visit, whether it's a great place to. Don't change the element that Knoxville was extremely dangerous in the 1800s. It's our history. It's part of it.
Well, you got to learn from it. I mean, and when you start burying things to make you look better, that's in the past. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it.
Todd knows all about burying some.
Yeah, bodies.
Yeah. Well, so I guess I probably should not ask you about the movies Paranormal Activity.
You talking about the spoofs?
Yeah, just complete fabrication. I mean, obviously
Ghost.
they were designed as a horror film, but I mean, given the context of the movie, do you think that's even remotely possible?
When I was a kid, impossible.
Yeah.
But a little bit.
you've
But
seen.
I'm going to give you guys a little secret history of mine. So I am a strong believer in God. So much so that out of high school, I was actually called to be a priest and went to the seminary for just about 2 semesters. But something crazy happened while I was actually a seminarian. So just to kind of understand the context, you got a priest and then you got a seminarian, which is basically to the Catholics a soon-to-be priest. So boy, they almost, some of them actually was like, can I tell you my problems? They actually wanted to go to you as if you were a priest. I'm like, I'm just a seminarian kind of stuff. But what's interesting is being behind the closed doors and things like that, being involved with the church and all this. I actually there was a headhunter priest from Northern California. I can't remember if he was like a Jesuit or one of these special orders within the Catholic Church. And what he was checking is who might have the interest in joining his order. And he says, my order specializes in exorcisms.
That's what I was going to ask.
And I looked at him with eyes blaring open, because this was even before I had my experience in Florida that got me in this field. I'm 18, 19 years old. And he says, do you have any questions for me? And this is all completely serious. He's not trying to play a game. It's like literally headhunting, because he needs to have people to join his order to continue stuff going on. He says, do you have any questions? And my first question was, is the movie Exorcist real? The stuff that happens in there is pretty shocking. And he looked at me with the most honest face, and he says, everything that happened in that movie, I personally experienced multiple times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I would freak out. Yeah. I mean, growing up as a kid, I was scared of the dark. I mean, I remember I grew up, we lived in a split level house. I was scared to go down the stairs. Now, my grandmother's house, which was probably built in 1800s, I'll have to go back and look at but I remember, I would go in the attic, digging around in the basement. I felt much, and it was dark and, was not afraid. So I always, I feel like it was good vibes, not that my house was bad vibes. I mean, we grew up in the country, so it was woods, and I was more afraid of animals than I was of poltergeists or anything like that. And, but I just remember, I'm like, why was I scared to go down the steps in the dark? But I'd be in my grandma's basement or up in the attic, which was, looking back now, I would, in my head, I'd be going, this is pretty spooky up here. I'd be a little bit more intrepid than I was back then. I mean, I remember going through boxes, not knowing what I was going to find or anything, just digging around as a kid. So I just think it's funny how our minds work too.
So can items be haunted?
Hey y'all, this is Tyler with your real estate tip of the day. When you're looking to buy a home, be sure your realtor checks to see whether or not your preferred area is serviced by a city fire department that's covered by the property taxes, or if it's in one that requires a paid subscription. Knox County is primarily serviced by rural metro, but your area may be different. The monthly cost will typically depend on location, which you can check your specific cost by entering your address on their website. I know nobody likes another monthly fee, but this one is definitely worth it. God forbid you need their services and have an emergency and don't have a subscription. If you do, then you are going to probably have to pay many thousands of dollars. If you have any other questions about this, or if you have other real estate related questions, please let us know at holler@yarpod.com.
Okay, and we're back with Brittany, Tyler, Todd, and Jay.
Hello.
So you were saying, do you think objects are haunted?
Mm-hmm.
And I think yes, because when I was moving into my parents' house, it was new construction, but I always had, for some reason, more often than not, I feel things on staircases than anywhere else.
You know why?
Why?
Well, if you look at look at the social aspects and just time periods, the way to get from the first floor to the second floor, you typically have to go up the staircases. So it's that channel, it's that way. So just spirits, if you want to believe that they exist, were once alive just like us. So if you're wanting a high chance to get interaction, you get right in the middle of the highway kind of thing that go up and down. So yeah, so it was like when I did a castle in Ireland, utilizing that, saying, you know what, I'll bet that this staircase is a hot spot, and go figure at one of the castles, it sure was. And because, again, the probability that there's activity there just because it's a staircase.
That's fascinating.
I love probability. Probability is everything in this field. For example, the probability that Knoxville, with all this traumatic history, would leave the probability that there's probably something left behind with it.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So I just love that.
Because it always made me wonder, especially being in new construction, I'm like, was this built over maybe a family graveyard? I don't know. But then
Chances are,
going
yes.
back to objects, is my house that we live in now is built in 1899.
Wow.
But it was completely redone down to the studs and basically rebuilt. And that was something that I was worried about whenever we were going to buy. But I can pick up on those things pretty quickly. And I've never felt anything there. I will say, kind of like the granddaughter, I do struggle with sleeping without a nightlight because I have had experiences in the past that I used to talk to ghosts and stuff. And so, yeah, I think redoing the house, maybe some of the energy is gone because the probability of someone dying in the house or something else happening,
Especially older
very
ones.
high.
Yeah, because they didn't really have the hospitals, and a lot of times people would end up passing away versus passing away in a hospital nowadays. And then what you did actually is kind of smart. So there's a difference between intelligent haunting and just residual haunting. So residual is actually in the term residual residue. So what's it a residue of? Why don't we do a panel on that? What do you think the residue is from?
Energy left behind.
Well, who's got energy? We do, right?
Yeah.
So we could leave a residual of our energy if something happened. Just like if you're in, grade school and they have PE and you got a locker. I'll tell you what, by the end of that week, there's a residual coming from your locker, right? We've left that smell on our clothes. So the same thing kind of goes to us. If we're scared and frightened, someone's attacking us, our energy is actually expanding from our body. And at that point, it actually imprints itself in the walls. So by you going down to the studs and getting rid of some of that original walls and foundation, what you're actually doing is you're removing where the residual would stick to. So a lot of times I'll say, if this house doesn't feel so good, one way you can clear that up is either, demolish completely the house and completely rebuild, or just remove some of those walls that are trapped in some of that, energy.
Yeah, I have a really good personal example of that exactly. And it was like probably, and I've had all kinds of experiences throughout my life. That's why I'm so excited to have you here. So when I was probably like 4 or 5, and I have memories from when I was 2. So like they're pretty clear memories.
You can remember when you're 2? Wow,
Yes.
That's a good memory.
Specific things that I'm like, oh, I remember when this happened. My mom is like, you were 2 when that happened. How do you remember that? I was like, I don't know. I just do. But yeah, so when my mom, my dad, and my sister all lived in this, it used to be a little store, but they had cleared out one side and turned it into a kind of a residential living space. And the store was really, really old. And so, I don't know, early 1900s probably. And so I don't know the history of the property at all, but I know that I was always afraid to go into the master bathroom to take a shower or bath when I was little, because almost daily, if I went into that room, I always would see a lady, at least it was a figure, it was a shape that to me I knew it was feminine, would walk from the shower to the sink and just kind of dissipate. So it was always the same motion from the shower to the sink, and then it was just gone.
Okay. So yeah, that definitely looks like a residual because it's not interacting with you. It's the same picture. For example, some people say, oh, this house that's on Airbnb is really haunted. And over the last 100 years, people will say that they see the lady in white walking down the hallway. The same picture is being seen periodically through that 100 years. That is a residual. There's left. But here's the part that I find fascinating. Residuals can be left in the negative, such as a traumatic event happened and the energy is expanded off of you, leaving it there. But on the other side of the coin, you can actually leave a residual with positive energy. And a great place to explain where you would see positive energy or feel positive energy, sorry, you don't see it, you would feel it entering a church, for example. Why? Because people are celebrating and their energy is expanding, but in the positive side. That's why when we walk into a church, we feel so loved and we feel so happy. It's because, yes, there's people in there who are happy, but you're also feeling that place is comfortable and accepting and loving and all that kind of stuff because that energy is there. So a lot of times we focus more on the darker side when we're doing paranormal investigation because all of us have that natural instinct to protect ourselves from danger. And anytime you feel an emotion that's on the opposite side of the coin, anger, sadness, fear, all rage, all these different kind of things, we're going to be heightened because we're always making sure that our environment's safe and conducive to us.
So, have you ever been to the building on Lakeshore Park on top of the hill?
You mean North Shore?
No, Lakeshore Park.
Yeah, that North Shore.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, North Shore was that asylum.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately, I've been noticing a lot of homeless downtown, and unfortunately, they closed that down, and a lot of those people ended up, ending up on the streets. So it's really sad that there's not places, for people who, need that additional assistance.
Definitely, yeah. I just always have heard stories about it. Same way with Brushy Mountain Prison. We were talking about that.
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah. And they actually do investigation tours there, but one of my concerns is, a lot of people who've never done it before, and they're joining this investigation team for an overnight investigation there. A lot of them don't have the training. And it's like, okay, you're going to start investigating, not knowing the rules and how you should do it safely and things like that at literally the Alcatraz of the South.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's not like I don't teach to be afraid of investigation, but I do think that we need to be a little bit more understanding of what's going on if we're going to go into something that has a higher probability that there might be a spirit that might be more aggressive than, say, a random spirit walking around the city.
And be respectful.
And we're not respectful. We're not respectful because we're fearful of it. We're respectful because we're honoring that age. It's like, how would you talk to great grandpa?
Right.
You're going to be respectful with him. That's just, it's part of it.
Well, going back to your house that was built in 1923, obviously you said you heard a man speaking.
Yeah, that was the heightened aspect. It was like saying, okay, faucets doing things, lights doing things, feeling certain energies in certain areas. You can kind of brush those off. But when it gets to be real, it's like, I know what it sounds like if a person's walking around the house, on the sidewalk kind of stuff, versus it's right there. It's right next to you. And then found out that the 1923 house, they didn't disclose this, by the way, that it was used as a nursing home in the 1980s, which means it was a makeshift hospital.
Oh.
Wow.
So it kind of connects the dots saying, what if I was an older person that was dying in a nursing home, my family didn't visit me? It would create a lot of anger, resentment, and if that spirit's still there, there's really no talking it into, okay, can you be nice?
Yeah,
They're just plain angry for whatever purpose it is, and sometimes there's no negotiating with them. It's like you're not going to stop them from being angry, and that's why ultimately I had to sell. And and with my new education, getting certified, running through some actual courses to understand more about this field, I found out that there is something used by a lot of paranormal investigators back in those days, which still used today, is burning sage.
Yeah.
All
I was
right,
going to ask you about that.
smudging. And so, my brain was thinking, okay, don't like the way it feels in here. I really don't feel like I want to be here just because I could tell that whatever's here doesn't seem like it wants to be nice and all that. So what I did is I smudged a house before every real estate showing to raise the vibration in there. And that was just me outsmarting the spirit, basically. And go figure, a week after I moved out, the living room ceiling fell in.
Oh, geez.
So basically at that point, with all due respect to that spirit, my middle finger went out and says, you thought you'd get me. No. So sometimes you have a situation that you really can't change. A lot of times when investigation just with your faith in God and basically saying, look, I'm not afraid of you because of my belief in God. And if you continue this, you're going to be judged. And I'll call God. And a lot of times spirits are afraid of that judgment from God. And so a lot of times people, just by going through the house and saying, by the power of God, you better leave, you better, knock it off kind of stuff. And a lot of times that will change a little bit of issues in a haunted house.
What's the, I'm fascinated by the science behind.
Oh, it's so amazing.
So what's the most tangible, most interesting piece of scientific training that you...
Well, the first thing is I've been in a wonderful position investigating for over 20 years, seeing the field change so much, and technology is the real reason why it has actually changed. So, back in early 2000s, when this stuff was still kind of in its infancy to a point, and people are still saying you're crazy to believe in ghosts and all this kind of stuff, to the point that 20 years later we can scientifically explain it. And so if I made a comment that I'm energy, back in the day, that was just a theory, all right? Well, thanks to technology, we can factualize that we are energy. This is a fact at this point. And then when you take into what Einstein said back, golly, what year was it that Einstein was around? And he created a theory saying that that energy can't be created nor destroyed. So if we're energy and it can't be destroyed, then that energy still, and another name for energy could potentially be spirit. All right. So, when you understand that we're energy and all this, and you start thinking, okay, in this haunted house, the door is opening by itself. Does science actually support that concept, seeing that this field has changed? And the answer is, yeah, kinetic energy. So if spirits are energy, could they utilize the kinetic form to get our attention? A cold spot out of nowhere in your house. Of course, you're going to try to find reasons why it would do naturally. Did the AC turn on? Is there a breeze? Is there a crack in the windows? Whatever kind of stuff. But if you get to the point that you can't explain it through natural purposes, then you start thinking, can energy interact with temperature? And it's thermal energy. So by whatever facts, with energy being able to speed up or slow down molecules, whatever kind of stuff, temperature can be changed. So that would explain, is it possible that spirits could, change the temperature? And some people ask me, so can spirits make it warm? I said, well, I'll give you two scenarios. You're watching Friday the 13th in the middle of the night in October. No one's around, lights out, and the temperature goes 15 degrees warm real quick. Are you going to be scared, or are you going to be like, why didn't the AC turn on? You know what I'm saying? But then the same scenario, it changed temperature within seconds to 15 degrees less. That will get our attention. So I believe spirits, they know how to get our attention. That's the whole reason why they open doors and shut doors. They want us to acknowledge they exist. So yeah, I can see why they make cold spots.
That makes sense to me.
I mean, I've literally, okay, you're going to love this. I've literally had scientists on my tour, and some people would really find that's like, oh, shoot, well, we're going to have a problem. We got a huge skeptic. He's a scientist. And this guy, he's like, and he was so cool. I really loved him. He was so awesome because, one, he knew he's a skeptic, and he wanted to make sure everyone understood that he's coming from a skeptical position because he's a scientist and works at an actual laboratory. This guy is top-notch scientist, right? And he's like, everyone, I'm a skeptic. Just want to let you know I'm a scientist, blah, blah, blah. I swear to God, by the end of that tour, we had all kinds of activity. He went to the group and had everyone listen. He says, guys, I'm a skeptic and I'm a scientist and all this. He says, I can't explain what just happened. And that's the cool thing about it. And he thought that I would be bent out of shape. Oh my God, you're a skeptic. And no, I love science. Come and tell me something else. Teach me something different about the energy. Why? Because in the last 20 years, it's been about me teaching. So then, or it's been about me learning. So then I could then teach. So with my knowledge base on energy, how this works, it came by me having open ears, listening to the scientists, trying to deduct what is going on. And now we're at the position saying, it's all making sense now.
Yeah, see, I really like the rationalization and scientific approach to the investigation instead of like the TV shows where they are literally just, show me you're here, make sounds, that kind of thing. So, I mean...
Well, it's hard to believe the shows, especially if they don't go through on the shows and teach you, why is it this happening? Just believe it that this device is lighting up.
Right.
That's not enough to convince me. But if you go into, this tool works this way, and this is why it works, and this is how it works, and this is how to recognize normal, and this is how to recognize something that doesn't seem normal. This builds my confidence when you actually use that knowledge base and that ability to understand and put pieces together, A and B, might equal C, kind of put the piece together.
So what kind of tools do you use on your tours?
Well, there's all kinds of tools. You got EMF detectors, which basically recognize magnetic energy. You got thermal, cameras that recognize thermal energy. You got cold spot detectors, which will recognize that as well. You've got devices that you can get EVPs through, electronic voice phenomena, such as a spirit box and things like that. So what we're doing is, if we want to believe spirits are energy, which, to be honest with you, if you don't believe that you're not really I believe you're not putting the science in place. It kind of, it's like, okay, we got all these different ways, magnetic, thermal, static energy, frequency energy, all these different options. We're giving them plenty of ways to communicate with us. And we didn't have that in the past. That's why this field, I believe, has expanded so much, is just because, we've gotten smarter. I don't know if that's always a good thing that we've gotten smarter, but we just know more about this. I feel bad for those people, say, that lived in the 1960s and they had a real disturbance in their house, but they couldn't tell their neighbors that they have it because they had.
You get hung.
You were a witch.
You were a witch.
No. You would not get hung. You would not get hung.
Not in the 1960s.
Todd's older than that.
Yeah. Are you from the 1600s? Is that what you're telling me right now?
You're outcasted.
But the key is back in those days, a popular place were those mental asylums. Yep. So based on how much this field technology changed over the years, I go back and think, if I was living in the 1960s, I feel bad for some of those people that may have been locked up in there because they may have had real disturbances, and now we have the tools to be able to recognize it.
Yeah, I can imagine somebody in that time period going to a neighbor and saying, man, I'm hearing voices, I'm seeing things, and just how that would come across.
Then the straitjacket gets pulled out.
Oh, yeah. It's like...
And back then, the way things were is the whole non-consent. If you were crazy, it was for your own protection. They would come and get you.
And then when you're in that asylum, then they're like, okay, you're a guinea pig. We're going to try all these tests. We're going to put you through living hell, and all this. And I'm like, what they did behind closed doors, which I've heard from a lot of these asylums, boy.
In the name of science.
Dr. Kevorkian kind of stuff. I mean, this crazy, crazy stuff.
You're definitely coming back and going to be a hostile poltergeist.
If you went in there...
No, I know exactly where I'm going. That bright light is my baby. It's my friend. I am not staying here.
And that opens the door to a whole other conversation, is like when people or... the energy is still there. Like, do you consider that the soul being trapped because they decided to stay, or because for whatever reason the whole unfinished business conversation? Do you have an opinion on what causes a person to be kind of a lingering force or energy that's stuck in one place?
That's actually an excellent question. So over the last 20 years, with me doing my deductions and trying to understand and try to bring sociology and humanities into the concept of investigating, understanding how people were back in 1800s, how were people, all this kind of stuff. And, when you put all the pieces together and say, I'm having a hard time. I just lost my train of thought. Does that ever happen to you guys? Restate the question so I don't, because this was a good one. I apologize. I was thinking one thing and went another way.
So the question is basically like, what causes a person to be lingering? Do you have unfinished business, or did... There it is. Yeah. So basically what I found over the last 20 years is trauma. So all these spirits have something in common, trauma. But we all know that there's many kinds of trauma. You got physical trauma, psychological trauma, emotional trauma, spiritual trauma, all these kind of stuff. Something is keeping that spirit from moving on to the next side. And a lot of us think that our choice, say in our life, we're at a fork in the road, we have to make that decision. Do I go left or do I go right? But once we die, who says we still don't have choice? So say, I'll give you a scenario. Say you are a mother in 1920. You lost your husband due to an illness. Your job was to take care of the homestead, your children, all that. And say you're driving home from work in your Model T Ford, because you got to keep it period, right? They didn't have vehicles that we have now back then. And on your way home, you get in a car accident. The light appears to that mother, but she knows her babies at home have no idea where she's at, and she's a protector. You think some mothers might choose, at least temporarily, not to move on because they want to make sure their kids are okay? And could that explain people feeling their loved ones, grandpa who passed away, felt their presence a little after they passed? Could it be that they're making sure the family unit's okay before they finally decide to move on? So, and then what takes it to the next level to be a good investigator is one, know the history. I know that this traumatic accident happened. And the next step is this, figuring out what would the trauma issues be with that mother. It'd be emotional trauma with dealing with missing her kids and her kids not knowing where it's at. It could be a physical trauma because the car accident was extremely painful maybe for them. And once you go through that and you ask questions directly to what is keeping them from moving on, at that point
you have a high chance that you're going to get a response on your devices, because I'm talking directly to what is the reason why that spirit has chosen not to move on.
Yeah, that's
I
kind
like
of
it.
that's kind of my thought on it is the whole choice thing. And I know anyone who is religious, at least in the Christian sense, free will is a big thing. That's a very theological. There's lots of studies on it, and
We can follow the examples of the Bible, or we don't. It's our choice that we have in our life.
right. And then so that should translate, in my opinion, to when you pass. It's not just you're going here, you're going there. Maybe you still have the choice of are you going at all.
Well,
And-
churches also have names for it. They call it limbo.
Yeah.
They call it purgatory. They call it the place with unfinished business. And of course, I love my participants, because you don't know what you're going to get from those participants. And one person, when I asked them, they raised their hand and said, Earth. I'm like, because you got heaven up there and you got hell down there, and what's in the middle? Right where we're at. So I'm like, I can't say no to that. And you put a big smile on my face saying, that's very true. But, and the same thing goes to angels and stuff like that. A lot of religions around the world believes in angels, and I believe in angels too. I believe that God's got its messengers, just like there might be some extremely dark stuff like demons and things like that, which are not as common as the TV shows make them out to be. All right.
Well, if you believe in one, there's got to be. I mean, I think you have to have the others. The good with
Absolutely.
the bad, the yin with the yang.
You've heard of these
whatever.
people who get in a car accident and a loved one's trapped under their car, and for some crazy reason, they're able to have superhuman strength to lift the car off that person. I believe at that point, as long as we believe in the angels and we believe that they have our back by being a Christian and believing all that, they'll help you. They'll help you if you call them. And I have I love angels. Angels are probably my most favorite thing in the world. And, if you can call angels, then, what do you have to lose? Say, hey, angels, come on, help me out. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not, call them, you can't go wrong.
Well, whenever you travel, do you ever call ahead a hotel room or anything like that and ask if anybody has died in that room? Maybe use your equipment to do a little investigating, or do you want to know?
Well, I would be lying if I didn't do some trips here and there and kind of saying, I wonder what this little city's like. I wonder if there's a haunted place there, and, all that kind of stuff. But to be honest with you, I don't do as much investigations as a lot of these other teams do, because really what my legacy has been is being the ultimate investigator / historian for Knoxville, and really opening up Knoxville to the world and making this, kind of, a special place for people who visit here.
I love that that's your take on getting the history of somewhere. That's a really unique way of doing that. And actually, I had bought a book probably a year or so ago, and it was about the haunted stories around Knoxville, some of the history and stuff. I've not been brave enough to read it just yet. Whenever I was a kid, I read those actually a lot, and I don't know how I slept, but
We need to get that fear out of you.
yeah, I know.
Maybe you need to come in and do an
You make me
investigation
feel-
with me so I can show you that, we're getting activity, but notice you're not scared. I've actually, on my investigations downtown, had more chuckles than anything else downtown, because some of the responses are just so crazy and absurd. Like one night, I'm using the spirit box, and I get into character. I'm like, I love being creative and using that historical knowledge. So I got into character. I was like, I got a question for you. I bet you've seen some pretty ankles back in the day. Now, when you think about the Wild West time periods, which, of course, when you're in that late 1800s area time period, people, it's a common thing that guys were really, woohoo, look at that lady with the ankles showing down there, right? It's a common thing. And so we had 20 people around the spirit box, listening to the responses, and it came through and said, uh-huh. I was on the ground rolling. I'm like, oh my God, that is so freaking funny. I connected to that spirit because something important to that spirit was, check out that lady's ankles.
Yeah.
Now you got these girls walking around with Spanx on and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I wonder how a cowboy would react to seeing the ladies dressed so scantily nowadays.
They're blushing.
They're blushing.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here with us. And I guess before you go, I do have a question, since it is Halloween season. What's your favorite Halloween movie?
I really like Poltergeist, to be honest with you. I think that they are way ahead of their time. I think that for it being in the 1980s that it came out, not to mention I did a special feature a couple years ago in Paranormal Underground magazine that I basically used, like I did in Knoxville. I decided to do a story on Poltergeist movie series and all that kind of stuff, and really digging into it, trying to be this, giving someone just so much cool knowledge base on the movie series, and so many crazy stuff with that. And it was just very, like, here's an interesting thing. Did you know, okay, so Poltergeist 1, you got the mother during the craziness in that house, she's in the pool scene, and all these skeletons are around her, and she's freaking out and all this. Did you know that they used real skeletons?
Yes. I saw that.
And did you know that they told her afterwards they were real skeletons?
You would have to tell me.
I tell
afterwards.
you what, if that was me, I would have sued the crap out of that TV station because the reason they used real skeletons versus made ones is that it was cheaper to get a whole bunch of skeletons from like India and use them for that versus making each individual one and all that kind of stuff. And then also the exercising of the TV set was a regular thing having to be done. And even the guy who played that crazy, scary minister guy, he had a really dark history to him, very, very unusual. And he was dying, on the, getting close to dying while he was filming that. And he chose to get so into his character to making him one of the scariest, people ever in these scary movies. And makes me this question. It's like, is that really, if I know I'm dying, do I really want to play with darkness that freaking much? There's got to be something wrong with my brain to get into a character. Is like, at that point, I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to make sure that you are like everything to me. I'm going to keep you close because I know I'm getting close and just want to make sure everything's good. And it's just like, dude, what is up with you?
Those character actors, they really get into it. They dive deep.
He did have a bit of a theatrical, history to him. He was into doing plays and shows and different things like that. But it takes a special person to be that extremely dark. Who knows? He may have been possessed.
I still can't get through and watch, not Poltergeist, but what was the one in the hotel? I can't remember.
Oh, that's number 3.
I still can't.
My favorite, though, is actually number 2. Because the number 2 goes more into the teachings of certain things that I do. I loved how the mother was being taught about her ability to connect to her psychicness and how to basically use all the things, Mother Earth and Father God and all this kind of stuff to be able to combat that darkness, which I find myself combating sometimes in my field when it gets really tough. And I look at that and say, what a legacy on number 2 to show people, whether it's made up or this thing like that, there is still some context in there that can be really good for people.
Yeah. Do you have tours that are coming up in this month? I'm sure you're super busy.
Oh man, yesterday was kind of my Friday, and just breaking into the first week of October, it has been double tours every night, and that's crazy. And the activity has just been. And I don't know why we're getting all this activity, but we get people on the tour that are kind of like, they're thinking, is this a regular ghost tour? I'm like, no, this is a paranormal adventure tour. This is a ropes course. You're actually investigating, and you can see their skepticism. And by the end of the night, they're getting this activity. They're like, what the heck is happening? I says, I know. I can't explain that. I literally had a submission from a participant last night from the other night that they had to share it with me so I could put it on my YouTube channel to share with the public and stuff, because again, they didn't think that they were going to get anything special, but getting a full sentence response and to a question that's directly responded, it's like, what the heck?
Jeez. Yeah, that is crazy. So is there anything that you want people to check out? Your website, your tours, a channel, anything like that?
Absolutely. Well, first thing is make sure you come to Knoxville, and of course, if you stay longer than a week, you're going to probably be looking for real estate, and these are the guys to make sure that you get everything all set and find your place up here. But yes, I offer my tours. They're paranormal adventure tours. The public tours are typically on Friday and Saturday nights. During October, I try to give as many opportunities for the public. This is very VIP. We're talking about 2 tours a night 20 max people per night. I mean, UT literally reserved October 24th, both the 7 and the 10 o'clock. They go really quickly. So if you are interested in actually having this opportunity to work with me, experience, real paranormal and do it safely and all that kind of stuff, make sure you grab your tickets well in advance. And I look forward to seeing you. Check out hauntedknoxville.net, reserve right up there. And we always are on sale because I always try to make sure that my tickets are very reasonable. So a typical box price for an adult ticket's $50, but I always keep it on sale at $40 just to make sure that you guys know that you're getting a great deal. And I love spoiling my participants, and maybe I'll see these guys here that are interviewing me, here on my tour. That'd be awesome.
Chances are pretty high. You'll see.
Yeah, I'm already like, I've got to go and order my ticket.
Yeah, well, you got the insider here. Grab them in advance before they're gone.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really enjoyed it. Super fascinating. So don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jay.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you or someone you know is thinking about buying or selling real estate in East Tennessee, email us at holler@yarpod.com. You can also reach Brittany Hawkins at 423-270-9572, Todd Huber at 865-456-0101, Tyler Letner at 865-816-0076, and Nick Cantey at 865-250-5167. Our office at Wallace Real Estate can be reached at 865-584-4000. Make sure to ask for YARPod. See y'all next week.